the Tasmanian Community Fund presents the Breaking Barriers, Building Futures podcast. Hosted by new Chairperson Kym Goodes, in conversation with new directors Mike Buckby and Matt Greskie.
Welcome everybody, and I would like to start this podcast by acknowledging the Palawa Pakana as the traditional and original owners of the lands we're meeting on today. We're here in Nipaluna, in Hobart, in Lutruwita, Tasmania, but I'm sure we've got listeners from communities right across our state. And can I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. It's an exciting time for the three of us who are here on the podcast today, as we've recently joined the board of the Tasmanian Community Fund, no small task, and as incoming chair of the board, I really acknowledge the work that's been undertaken by previous board members. I'm quite excited to join the board and to continue to champion the initiatives and the empowerment at a local community level to create local solutions that are really tailored to the needs and aspirations of local people in Tasmania. The fund is such a unique thing and such a precious gift to Tasmanians, and as the new incoming stewards of that fund, our job is to obviously ensure that Tasmanians' voices are front and centre in the work that we do and in all the work that I've done in Tasmania over many years in communities and the community sector. It's important to ensure that we understand how critical that role is, and that many in our community don't always have a voice to be able to come forward and direct how decisions are made. So I take that on with the greatest of respect and understand and acknowledge that responsibility. A quick grab about me before I'm going to hand over to my fellow directors Mike and Matt for their introduction. I've spent pretty much my whole working life in the community and the community sector in Tasmania, having been born and lived in Launceston for most of my life. However, spent 10 years in Nipaluna, Hobart before moving back north. So I've witnessed firsthand the incredible impact that the fund and projects that are driven by local people can have. And as part of that team of TCF Board and staff, I look forward to being part of those collective efforts to continue to do that. And it's partly what motivates me at my stage and age in life to ensure that as much as I possibly can, I can give back to Tasmania the incredible life that it's offered for me and my family. So I'm going to look now to you, Mike, because you're seated most close to me, to ask for some introduction and your motivation for joining the board.
Thank you, Kym, and thank you so much for the opportunity and to be alongside yourself as chair. And it's something that I'm really looking forward to continue on the work that previous board members have done too. I think it's really important that us as new board members have a recognition of the amount of work that was done by previous directors as well. And I think that's proven by some of the projects that we're witnessing already, and it's very exciting. But for myself, I'm from the far northwest coast, had a lifetime living in the Circular Head region. For those that don't know, it's the far northwest coast. So agricultural background in all my life, but a very strong background in community groups as well, both in Circular Head, across everything from local government to heritage conservation and tourism, but also in dairy agri-politics, a lifetime of that, going back a few years now. But like you, I'm at the age and stage now where giving back into the community more broadly, and especially some community groups that perhaps are struggling to represent themselves and have a voice, and to give them a chance to realise their dreams as well. And that's something that's pretty exciting for me. One of the other things, I've been really fortunate many years ago to be involved in an organisation called Rural Youth. And that gave me opportunities to serve on a state level and to really see the differences in rural and regional communities around Tasmania. We're all interrelated, and we interact very well with each other, but there are differences. And I think that knowledge helps as well as what can I bring to the Community Fund Board.
That's brilliant. Thank you. And Matt, talk us through your background and your motivation for joining the board.
Thanks, Kim. Well, the first thing you should know is that I'm a civil engineer, and civil engineers absolutely hate talking about themselves. So thanks very much for this opportunity. It's always appreciated. But look, now I reached the shores of Tasmania a bit over 20 years, born and bred in a rural background, and came to Tasmania for a 3-year contract, and like everybody else, made Tasmania home. And I've loved doing business here, but my wife and I have raised two great men who are contributing to Tasmanian community now. And we wouldn't be anywhere else. This is our home.
And I'm guessing, Mike, where you are in Circular Head, and I know your work on the board of Windara. Do you want to give us some examples of where you can see that really powerful local community-driven responses to local need?
So one of the things, and it's probably replicated in a lot of rural areas, so I'm the volunteer chair of Windara, Board of Directors, and one of the things that was something that wasn't on our radar probably 3 to 4 years ago, but 18 months ago, was Circular Head, because of its relative isolation, those that have families that have members with disability, that there's no disability accommodation in Circular Head. So anyone that requires some specialist care have to leave the comfort of their family, the community, the which they live, and leave. And that can be very confronting. And so we had quite a demand come forth. So a period of just about 18 months ago, we started the process to build specialist disability accommodation, and it's really exciting for us to go through that the framing is up now, and that our first stage will be in July this year, which will be the first thing ever for Circular Head. It's a huge financial commitment and stress, but we're always about community need and responding to community need.
I think it's fair to say the three of us probably bring some very strong directorship and governance experience. I chair the board of the No Interest Loans Scheme, also in a voluntary capacity, but we look at how people living on the lowest of incomes can access safe, secure finance where they don't pay any interest. It helps to keep them safe from predatory lenders who are trying to, payday lenders, etc. But not dissimilar to a comment you just made, Matt, it also gives people the dignity to control their own loan. They can pay it back. They can feel good about the fact that when they look at the fridge or the washing machine or the really most basic piece of furniture in their house, that they've been able to safely borrow to get to a point where they own it. It's a very powerful thing to be able to help people be able to self-determine and have their own level of dignity. So I think bringing together that directorship capacity that the three of us have got into the TCF, but also that really first-hand knowledge of the lives and the challenges that are facing some Tasmanians provides a really good complementary set of skills to the existing board members who also come from very similar, very committed backgrounds. Mike, I might throw back to you again. You mentioned rural youth, and obviously the needs of young people are quite high on the agenda for our board. Are there areas in rural communities and regional Tasmania that you think are really critical through the lens that you look at that?
One of the things that we're finding, and I can only speak for Circular Head, but from reading, it's replicated in rural areas, is lack of transport, especially to education. Once you get into tertiary level education, that can be very confronting and an issue for especially families from low income, and how to have timely transport options as well to get to school or to uni in start of the day, not at 11 o'clock after going through 3 towns to get there. So that's something that the solutions are getting there, but I don't think it's there yet. So that's something that's very confronting for students and young people, and also some mature people as well in Circular Head. And I'm sure it's the same in every area, isolated area around Tasmania.
Yeah, it's important kind of to remember and acknowledge that the things that you might take for granted in a city around a public transport system look so different in rural and regional Tasmania.
There's no public transport.
No. And for you, Matt, in that sort of group of younger people, because our TCF strategic plan's currently got a very strong focus on that, are there particular areas that you bring in a strong interest in when it comes to that?
Yeah, certainly we just see through our foster care that quite often it's just very simple access to basic health needs, access to dentists and, mental health assistance, all those sorts of things. So anything we can do to increase that opportunity, and I'm sure it's not just our experience, I'm sure that's in every, regional rural community throughout Tasmania. So definitely just keen to help them get those, most basic of services.
Yeah, and I think this conversation is highlighting something that's also really important in terms of the kind of the systems and the attitudes that often make assumptions about young people, and it's them who are disengaged when often it's actually the systems or the institutions who are not able to cope with the needs of young people, not the other way around. And most young people are quite motivated. We were talking the other day in some other work I was doing that the level of volunteering in Tasmania of our young people is actually higher than the level of volunteering of older Tasmanians. But it's easy for people to jump to some stigmatising and attitudes around that. So I think part of the educational work that our Tas Community Fund does really well in the work that I've seen previously is to help raise the understanding of why some people in Tasmania don't have the same opportunity to participate, which is a good segue to another question really. In coming into the fund role and on the board, etc., some really strong principles I know I bring in around the independence of the TCF, the ability for us to be accountable and transparent in how we work, and thinking about making sure that our stakeholder voices are hearing from us regularly and we're hearing from them. Are there other areas that you are coming in with that you think are really critical as we think about the next 5 years of the TCF and projecting forward that will, as a new director on this board, want to ensure that we are focused on? And I'll throw to you, Matt, first.
Yes, certainly. I think for me, the key message from some of the experience last year is that we just want the entire community to have complete confidence in the governance of our organisation. And not suggesting that there's probably only a small element of the community that didn't feel that way last year, but we need to really work on that. And we need to maybe be overtly transparent and make sure that all of our decision-making is really robust and that can be demonstrated to be robust, and so that we can give every single member of the community complete confidence in our governance and our decision-making.
Yeah. Great. Mike, what's going to be critical for you in these next few years?
Just reiterating what Matt had just mentioned, but also just the fact that Community Fund was established in 1999, so a bit over 25 years. And I think, yes, there was some issue about 12 months ago, 18 months ago. And putting into perspective, that was one that was perceived as controversial, but there's been some 3,000 grants over that 25-year period that's been very beneficial for all communities in Tasmania, community groups. And I think we've got to be, as Matt mentioned, transparent, but also really effective in our communication. So those grants and those funds and the benefits for the communities, we can be out there in the community and be overtly communicating effectively and positively for the change. It is a positive change for each and every community and individual that's a benefit from those grants.
Yeah, great. And I know an early priority for me, which we've already talked about at our first board meeting, is to establish that sort of pulse check with our stakeholders. So going out and getting some independent feedback on where we're at and making sure that we can regularly be checking in on that, I think will be really critical as new board members, so that we can learn from our stakeholders what matters to them, what we're doing really well, but also where we might need to listen and learn from our stakeholders as well. So they're pretty critical early learnings, I think, as three board members who are coming in with a lot of information to absorb in these first weeks as directors. It's a pretty exciting role, but it's also got quite a bit of responsibility wrapped around it, both in a pragmatic grants management capacity all the way through to making sure that we really do understand the heart and soul of local Tasmanian communities and local Tasmanian people.
Yeah, I think you're right, Kim, and as Matt alluded to as well, we're here to serve the Tasmanian community, and it's a it's a fund established for the benefit of the whole Tasmanian community.
Yeah.
So through increased communication and effective transparency, I have a very positive outlook of where the fund is going to in the future. Probably like both of you do as well. I think it's pretty exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things we haven't talked about yet, and I certainly have reflected on this a lot coming into the chair's role, is just how interconnected we all are in Tasmania. In fact, I could make a joke about how related we all are in Tasmania. What is it, 5 degrees of separation?
Probably 2.
Probably 2. And the further north as I am, or northwest as you are, we go, that probably those degrees reduce. So let's have a think about, and I certainly know that we've had some discussions, but I think it's important for people listening to get some understanding of how we manage the close relationships that we all have, in part because we come from the community and the community sector in some of the roles we already have, and really trying to think through how we manage those conflicts as directors. Certainly I often use what I call the today tonight test, or the pub test, where if it was on a evening news or front page of a newspaper, would I think it was okay? But we do have pretty strict controls as a board around that, and we've been fortunate to walk into a board with very strict controls. Could you both tell me a bit about how you're going to manage those challenges in terms of conflicts of interest and relationships?
So, Kym, you're right. And a former position that I had was managed interstate, and it was an ongoing joke. And we as Tasmanians are very familiar with them, but they often said that you're related to half of Tasmania and you know the other half. And I said, but that's Tasmania. We have a very strong sense of community, and especially in the regional areas, it's even stronger. And it's something we should take great pride on. But that's not to say, with good governance and oversight, that when it comes to interest, if we know if there's grants come forward, even remote interest or whatever, we step out. We step out of that decision making, because we cannot be seen to be taking a side, either yes or no, to any grants. And that's something I'm very strong on as well. And sometimes it can be hard for people that approach us, saying for guidance about how do we do this, but we just forward it on to our relevant staff to deal on an arm's length. And that's critical for us as board directors, that we cannot be seen to being taking one position or another.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. Just going to reflect Mike's comments, but that we need to hold the absolute highest level of ethics and integrity around this, and that at any time it hits our radar that we might in any way be slightly connected to an entity or an organisation or an individual, we need to step away from that decision-making process. But what I'm also really looking forward to is just ensuring that we've got really strong frameworks, really robust processes and means to actually, assess the different applications that come in a manner that, again, is so transparent and repeatable, and that we can actually say that the reason that the number of entities were supported and some unfortunately weren't is through a process that can be defended. So that's what I'm excited to see that we land.
Yeah, and I think coming back to those principles we talked about earlier of independence, but wrapped around independence is transparency and accountability. This sits so firmly in the middle of that, which is really critical. Yeah, great. Thank you, Mike and Matt, for joining me today on the podcast. It's always a bit nerve-wracking when you have to do your first one, and I think as a board we're pretty keen to continually come back to Tasmanians via the podcast, but also other means of communication to ensure that we can stay connected and hear closely from people around the state. So thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mike, for our first directors podcast for us as the 3 new directors on the TCF board.
Thank you so much, Kym. Pleasure.
Thanks, Kym. It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to the Breaking Barriers Building Futures podcast, presented by the Tasmanian Community Fund. The fund seeks to increase community wellbeing by removing barriers to learning and help Tasmanians to develop, deliver and lead responses to their needs. For more information, go to tascomfund.org.